what was new to me was the fact that the entire system, for different reasons, collaborated on a horrible miscarriage of justice that not only spanned 3 trials, but it must have cost tens of millions of taxpayer dollars. That I was not prepared for that. I mean, I was unclear about how anyone could go home at night and think that they did a good job if they were involved in this case.
I think one of the cherries on top was when the Iraqi police chief was flown out the night before he was supposed to testify.
That was a good one.
The government had found out he was tied to 2 or 3 terrorist organizations.
Oh, they knew, but they were worried that that was going to come out.
Unfinished business, stand up tall.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Unfinished Business, a podcast for veterans pursuing new life missions. Some stories don't come to you, they come for you. Not with headlines, but with names. Names spoken too carefully in courtrooms and too carelessly in the press. Names that used to be uniforms, then case numbers, then something no man should ever become. A symbol of someone else's justice. The truth was never on trial, but the men were. Paul Slough, Nicholas Slatton, Evan Liberty, and Dustin Hurd carried that weight through Bosnia, through Iraq, and then into federal prison cells, convicted in a war zone, buried in the fog of politics, nearly forgotten by the country that sent them. They weren't the defendants of a singular case. They were the placeholders for someone else's guilt. The verdict came long before the facts were ever laid to bear, and Gina Keating saw it happen not just in court, but in headlines and in silence. She didn't come to exonerate. She came because no one else stayed. Raven 23 is what she wrote when the silence got louder than the story. This episode isn't about proving innocence. It's about exposing abandonment. It's about what happens when the mission changes and no one tells you what it is anymore. It's about a book, a team, a trial, and the truth that refuses to stay buried. It isn't where the story ends. It's where someone finally opens the record again. Gina, Paul, my man, my brother. It's good to see you, my brother. Good to see you. Yeah, it's this amazing opportunity to have you guys, have y'all talk about Raven 23. The intro, was there something about the intro that you said, whoa, this a couple of 2 or 3 things that you're like, oh my God, this hit me?
Yeah, I mean, all of it, basically. You wrapped it up perfectly in that intro. Yeah, I was nodding my head along because it's exactly what happened. But when I approached it, I did not know that. It was a totally different experience for me coming in from the outside.
Yeah.
I had to find that out.
And Paul, what about you in this intro that spoke to your heart?
Yeah, the point that Gina made the conscious choice to, as they say in West Texas, stand up in her stirrups and really go to bat for people that she didn't really know anything about. And her journey along that route from the first time she knew about it until we met in a prison visitation room is, I think, a story just in itself.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Which one of y'all wants to give a little snapshot of this, of Raven 23 and the situation that unraveled in the sewer?
Me, you? Who do you want to do
Go
it?
ahead.
So essentially it was, these guys were Blackwater contractors. They were protecting diplomats and were sent actually they were the backup crew when a vehicle-borne explosive device went off about a mile from the green zone. Mm-hmm. And they were just waiting and eventually went into Nisser Square. They were fired upon by insurgents, who they saw and who Iraqi civilians saw. And they had to fight their way back out to get back to the green zone. It was pretty normal from what I understand, from what my research has shown, and from what Paul and all the other guys, not just the guys who ended up in prison, but the other, people who were on the, who were in the Raven 23 team. They all said, this wasn't anything unusual. So, because it happened in 2007, which was one of the most violent periods of the Iraq War. So, they didn't think anything about it. It shows up on CNN about 30 minutes later, and then all of a sudden it's a huge international incident. And the steps that were taken to blame this on them. And I mean, the thing that is so unbelievable to me is, the body count was not even accurate. They reported shooting 8 to 10 people. That's how many they shot. But somehow it got inflated to 34 people. And it changed from one to the next, one court case to the next. I mean, the government was essentially locked onto this incident to try to exonerate itself with the American public and with the Iraqi public for all of the failures in Iraq. So I followed the case from 2016 until they were freed in 2020. And I mean, there were 2 extra trials when I finally got involved. And the way that the narrative changed the entire time that this was happening was just unbelievable. It was shameless.
Yeah. Well, that's insane. It, just keeps, if you're in this vortex of narratives changing. Paul, how did that overtake you? Did it overtake you at times or two when you were in this situation?
Oh, of course. I recall back to the time when we had gotten the news that Judge Urbina had tossed out the first case. So in legalese, we were granted a castigar hearing, which is pretty rare. But essentially, it's going through the evidence to determine taint, if there was taint that found its way onto the evidence. It was about a 3-week trial. Undersecretary of Defense Gordon England testified at that one, along with several others, and everyone walked away just kind of really shaking their head, like, holy cow, we really find ourselves in this situation. And by the end of that 3 weeks, of course, we went home, and Judge Urbina issued a ruling, I believe it was New Year's Day.
New Year's Eve.
New Year's
Yes,
Eve.
it was New Year's Eve.
09.
2009. That's right.
And he tossed the case out and said, not only have you trampled their constitutional rights, these guys were already cleared by State Department officials before they left.
And not only that, but this case is rife with prosecutorial misconduct. And also, I mean, what they did to Nick Slatton, the government decided not to charge him at first because he was inside one of the vehicles. He was the sniper, and he reported that he shot 2 people, or 1 person, I'm sorry, fired 2 bullets, shot 1 person who was shooting at the convoy. And they said, well, we don't have enough evidence, really. We're going to go ahead and dismiss him from the case. And for some unknown reason, they decided, maybe we want him back in. So they went to him and said, hey, we're gonna charge you again with manslaughter. And he said, no. And the statute of limitations had already run on the manslaughter charge. So they said, you know what we're going to do if you don't agree? We're going to charge you with murder. And that's what they did, because there's no statute of limitations. This is the type of behavior that we saw from the Justice Department, and it happened throughout the entire case. They were completely unconcerned with the fact that this was happening in public.
Wow. Before this story became a book, before it became a case, what did each of you believe about justice?
I mean, it's red, white, and blue. We don't get things wrong. We always get it right, and we're always on the cause of right. And having gone through this process, you learn pretty quickly that that's not always the case. Jeremiah 17:9 calls out the heart of man. Who can know it? And what we found ourselves in was a political milieu between the country of Iran, the United States, and an oil company. And what was just a routine instance when we were receiving an average of 180 attacks a day in the city of Baghdad turned into what we know now as the most controversial gunfight, I think, in the entire Iraq War.
Wow.
And for what reason? I mean, that's what I wanted to know when I looked at this incident, because they were comparing it to the My Lai massacre. And I thought, seriously, I started looking at, at the drone wars that were conducted at the same time, or actually when they were recharged, when President Obama came in. And I thought, no, first of all, there is evidence of 2, maybe 3 people who were in the Nisser Square who were civilians who were killed. There were 2 other incidents that happened at exactly the same time that had other victims, but they were all lumped into the Raven 2-3 men. So, I did a lot of research on that, and I thought, that isn't even accurate, because what Paul's saying is true. There were so many attacks in Baghdad at the same time that this was nowhere near the worst incident in terms of death count at all.
Yeah. When you first heard about the Nisser Square incident, and what made you decide to stay with this story long after it became politically inconvenient?
Well, it was politically inconvenient from the beginning because I'm a liberal. I vote Democrat. I mean, not always, but most of the time. I'm very, very sure that is, that is what I believe how we solve problems is the Democratic or the liberal way. So when I first found out about it, and it was my boyfriend at the time who was friends with Dustin Hurd's father. And he said, you got to do something about this. I'm sure that this kid did not do this. And I was a business reporter. I worked for Reuters for a number of years. I worked, for the Los Angeles Daily Journal. Most of my experiences in law, government, business. I didn't have any foreign policy experience. So I told him, no way, no, I'm not doing this because I don't want to report on the Iraq War anymore. I didn't ever do it, so I'd have to learn a lot, and I just don't want to do it. So it was never something I wanted to do, but, he was really insistent. And so I said, all right, look, I want to at least meet him. I want to meet Dustin Hurd. I want to meet Paul Slough, Evan Liberty, and Nick Slatton. And I want to see what kind of guys they are. So we went. I mean, he and I went, and we visited Dustin in prison, in the federal prison. I went alone to see Paul in El Reno, Oklahoma, and then went up to see Evan in Pennsylvania. So I went and I met all of them, because when I looked at the court papers, which I finally did in around 2015, I realized from covering a lot of criminal cases that there were so many irregularities that would have had this case thrown out in any other instance. The case should never have gone to trial for so many reasons. But then the fact that it just got shoved through over and over was kind of weird to me. So I thought, okay, this is wrong, and I want to see what happened. I mean, a lot of times, prosecutors in my experience, and law enforcement sometimes will say, well, we couldn't get him on these other things, but we could get him on this, and that's why we're going to go after him. And so I thought, well, I'm going to go see, what kind of guys they are. So I went and did it. And when I met him, I thought, what? These guys?
Yeah.
There's nobody more true blue, more, no more loyal to the United States and everything it stands for than these 4 guys.
Circling back on your comment where you made a comment about this trial should have never happened, it was NACDL that provided an amicus brief for our oral argument against for our appeal. And they essentially said the same thing, that this should have never happened in an American court. And so looking back, no wonder the judge was asleep during the entire trial. Well, a good portion of the trial. He had to be woken up for objections because in his mind, the outcome was already set.
Yeah. Paul, strip away the headlines, the politics, the trial. What was the mission you believed in, and what made you return to it?
Bringing liberty to a people that had been under the iron fist of oppression since I was a child.
Yeah.
Seeing desperation in people's eyes does something to your soul as a person.
Yeah.
And at that time, in my life and my experience, those people were starving. They were going through just complete rolling blackouts. They had no security. Everything was so topsy-turvy. And I mean, the moment you got off the plane, you could feel it. I don't know how to explain it, but you get off the plane, you can feel that just pressure, and it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Gina is a self-described liberal journalist, right?
Right.
Did this story ever force you to withdraw your ideological lines?
I'll tell it to you this way. I still believe in a lot of the platforms. I would say I'm a Rooseveltian Democrat, so more of a moderate. But what I find so difficult, and that has gotten so much worse since I started this, was the fact that people simply don't hear you. The politics in this country is no longer about solving problems. It's about being right. It's about dominating. It's not about looking at a system that is broken and saying, this is totally wrong and we've got to stop this, because everything that makes America great is our due process. You know what I mean? So it's like, well, if we can't even, make sure that people who are innocent get a fair trial, then what is this for? So yeah, I mean, definitely. And it opened my mind a lot that when somebody is complaining about something and you might not be of the same persuasion as them, you might not have the same experience that they have, that you need to listen. You need to listen and see what their perspective is, especially as a journalist. That's something that this case brought me back to, is that curiosity is the number one thing that you have to do this job properly. And, as a journalist, we have a tremendous amount of power. So it's our responsibility to listen. And that is how this case changed me, because I think after being in the media for decades, especially in big cities, I kind of forgot that there is a different perspective that needs to be listened to.
Wow, that's omnipotent stuff that you just put out there, about just getting to another level of awareness of you and what's going on around you, just awareness about what people are going through and tapping into their humanity and their hurt, and in this case, Paul, what truth did prosecutors and media have no room for in their version of what happened that day?
Ooh. I'd say the most poignant moment that really put an exclamation point on that was when a little bird gunner was being cross-examined. Excuse me. There's a direct examination by the prosecutor when he testified that he witnessed civilians taking off IP uniforms and wrapping up AK-47s and putting them back in the back of a bongo truck. And the prosecutor actually broke a tooth. Anthony Asuncion, he broke his tooth, and he asked for an extension. And so court closed for that day. He went and got his tooth taken care of. But before we all left, and while the witness was still on the stand, he said, well, why didn't you say anything during the grand jury testimony? And he said, well, sir, you never asked. You never ask. Then a grand jury exchange, you don't get to have a defense attorney. It's just you and the prosecutor.
Yeah.
And everything's behind closed doors, and nobody really gets any insight into that.
Yeah.
And that was, I guess, the most telling point for me, is that you just never ask, because they didn't want the answer to the questions, right?
Yeah.
And so I said, okay.
Do you see that now? Like there is a issue with grand juries?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. How do you take an American citizen walking into a situation that they probably have never been exposed to, have no idea even what the rules are, and what may come out of this, into an environment like that without any type of representation, to me is completely flawed.
And not only that, this case is a wonderful example about why the grand jury system is so flawed. One of the things that in my book talks about the fact that in the second grand jury, as Paul told you earlier about the Castigar hearing, that was because another thing that really violated their rights was they had made statements about the incident that were work related, right? They were work related. They were supposed to be confidential. It's very similar to like what police do, what happens with police officers when they have a shooting, on the job shooting or something. That is something that they are allowed to say what happened. They will not get fired as long as they don't lie. So it's a very reliable barometer of what happened, because if you do lie, you're going to not only get fired, but you're probably going to get prosecuted. So they all had to do that when they came back from this Nisser Square incident. They all gave statements, all 19 of them did. But, and I truly believe this, I never was able to figure out who leaked it, but someone in Washington, I'm pretty sure from the State Department, leaked it to ABC News. And within, what was it, like a couple of hours or a day or so, your statement was on the internet. Your protected statement was on the internet, then Dustin's. So it, all of this stuff that was not supposed to have been shown to anybody was leaked because of the political situation around what was going on in Iraq, not because of what was going on in Nisser Square, because that was not remarkable in any way. It was an incident like many other incidents, but just for some reason, I think it was probably because someone sold some footage to CNN, that this became the poster child for everything that was going wrong in Iraq. So anyway, so the whole case, first of all, should not have been brought because everything was tainted by those statements. So Paul's leaked, Dustin's leaked, and then all these other pieces started leaking. So everyone who saw these had tainted testimony because their testimony was not their own. They had seen what everybody else had said. And so it was all tainted. So that was one reason that it shouldn't have gone to trial. But so they had an extraordinary grand jury process where they were supposed to eliminate everything that was tainted by those statements. Well, the FBI and the DOJ took the opportunity under the guise of taint to remove everything that was exculpatory to them. So they were not telling the grand jury that they were being fired at. They were not telling them about the Iraqi civilian witness statements that said, yes, they were being fired at. They were not telling the grand jury about the outlandish civilian statements about, people firing out of airplanes. So it was really a mess. And the problem is, like Paul said, you don't ever get to see the grand jury statements.
Yeah.
So thankfully, one of the lawyers who represented a different guy who was dismissed from the case, Donald Ball, he wrote to the DOJ and said he had seen it, obviously, because he had a client. He had seen all of them, and he wrote this long 12-page letter that cited all this grand jury testimony and said, you did not tell the grand jury this. You did not tell them this. You failed to tell them about this witness statement. So we had this beautiful documentary of all of the things that the FBI had lied about in the grand jury. And that's the only reason that we know how they got those convictions or how they got the indictments.
Wow. That's, wow. That's I didn't know this much of the story, but now I know a lot. And it's like, holy.
I mean, they didn't stop at anything. They lied to the grand jury.
Yeah, that's insane. You're in media. How did your perception of institutions, government, media, and the justice system change you as you unraveled this legal journey with Raven 2-3?
I've covered the government for a long time, and I know that a lot of people that seek government offices love power, and they use it to advance their own careers. That happens a lot with the DOJ. A lot of lawyers who are ambitious will go in there, serve a couple years, make headlines with cases, and then they'll go on to a big job at a big law firm making a lot of money so that they can say, yeah, look what I did. So I was kind of used to that, that kind of individual. What was new to me was the fact that the entire system, for different reasons, collaborated on a horrible miscarriage of justice that not only spanned 3 trials, but it must have cost tens of millions of taxpayer dollars. That I was not prepared for that. I mean, I was unclear about how anyone could go home at night and think that they did a good job if they were involved in this case.
I think one of the cherries on top was when the Iraqi police chief was flown out the night before he was supposed to testify.
That was a good one.
The government had found out he was tied to 2 or 3 terrorist organizations.
Oh, they knew, but they were worried that that was going to come out. So the guy who investigated it, you have a typical crime, and you usually have the police investigator, right, who did all to come and testify about how they did the investigation, right? Mm-hmm. So this guy, they decided to not hire it, but basically give this into his hands and let him do the investigation, right, in an American court. Yeah. Then they brought the guy to the United States along with something like, 46 witnesses? It was the largest number.
Wow.
Yeah, largest number of foreign witnesses ever in any case, in any criminal case. So they brought them all over and put them all up for months in the United States. I don't think they did any background checks on any of them. They just brought them to the United States. So this guy comes in, and I believe that they were doing some kind of opposition type research to see who he was. He had intelligence files open on him because he was being paid to give information about U.S. troop movements to the Badr Corps and the Mahdi Army.
Wow.
Yeah, that was who was in charge of the investigation into their case. I mean, we're laughing now, but it was horrendous. And the judge would not let that evidence in. There were 2 more trials, and he would not let that evidence in.
Wow. I'm listening to this conversation as you both of y'all talk and share. Like, I'm learning about, the inefficiencies of our government, even at a whole nother level, right? And anybody who listens to this podcast, they're gonna tap into what you're sharing, what we're sharing. They're gonna have some awareness on who they vote for and how they vote when it comes to
I'll circle back one more time.
Yeah.
You asked about earlier, kind of what was the aha moment, and another one was when we were in trial and we first found out about the drone footage. Our defense attorneys didn't even know we had drone footage. We didn't either. We didn't know we had a drone out.
Wow.
The footage shows us coming into the square, and then it's black.
It's like,
and then there's a wet spot where our Bearcat was that was shot out from under us. And then it's over.
yeah, so it's
And it was
like
our fault for not preserving that evidence.
they tried to say that, yeah. I mean, it was crazy because they said, oh, that's because we had to recycle the tape. No, you didn't, because if you did, the whole thing would be gone, not a little bit in the beginning and a little bit at the end and nothing in the middle to show what really happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that happened.
That's insane. Wow. That's crazy.
It's like the Watergate of Raven 2-3.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Insane, Steve. Paul, when did it stop feeling like a legal case and start feeling like you were being hunted for someone else's sins?
That's a good question. I think when my first attorney called me and said that the DOJ wants to bring 150 counts on all 5 of you.
Where did that come from?
And I was like, 150 counts for what? And he just started reading through this list, and I was like, okay. This is not a venture in truth. This is not a venture in justice. We're a scapegoat. Yeah, we're a scapegoat.
150. There weren't even that many deaths on that day.
Yeah.
I mean, I went back and looked at all the media coverage from September 16, 2007. 12 people died in the entire city that day. So I don't know where they got that. And the other thing that was so crazy to me, because I covered hundreds of criminal trials, there was no ballistic evidence at all. The only bullet fragment that was pulled from a victim was from an AK-47, was an AK-47 bullet fragment. There were no other bullets from a U.S. round.
In fact, the FBI analyst from Quantico was asked by my attorney directly how many rounds or round shavings were found on any civilian body, civilian vehicles, or the scene itself that matches these defendants' weapon systems. He said none.
There were none.
Wow.
And not only that, at the time they were, because the U.S. was killing so many people, and I actually talked to Robert Ford, who was the affairs at in the Baghdad embassy. And I said, so you guys were paying people when they died? Like Iraqis could come to the U.S. embassy and claim that they had a dead family member, and you would pay them $10,000. If they had damage to their property, they would pay you $5,000. And if I can't remember what the last one was, I think if it was an injury, it was $5,000. And if you had property damage, it was $2,500. And he said, yeah, that's what we were doing. So basically, they got on TV after this happened, and they had, it's like a mesothelioma ad. You know, if you got shot in a Sur Square, give us a call and let us know. I think that must be where they got that ridiculous number of bodies. But it's just shocking to me because, you know, I covered a lot of cases in Los Angeles, and you can't say that the LAPD is the most, you know, ethical body after the Rampart scandal. But, you know, I cannot imagine the prosecutors going into the judge and saying, hey, the police didn't get there for 3 weeks and we didn't shut down the square. Oh, yeah, we didn't do any autopsies and there's no ballistic evidence at all. Oh, yeah, and all the cars that were supposedly ripped apart by their machine guns, they were towed immediately after. The case would have been thrown out. The judge would have laughed.
Yeah.
But that did not happen here. And all of that was the foundation of this case.
You know, as I'm sitting here a few minutes ago, I felt this like stillness, like this whole, like if there was a room full of 100 people here listening to this conversation, that there would have been this cold, like you could hear a pin drop, because the spiritual elements that are in the present moment, as you both are sharing a very important conversation, not just from a, you know, talking about what happened, but all of what happened, the spiritual, the emotional, psychological torment, and I feel it's necessary because, you know, when y'all were talking, I was like, man, I got to tell him thank you. Like, thank you for coming in here and because this is suffering, you know, and at this high, at the most high, at the highest level as you can get, over and over, 150 times over, right? And I just want to, I just want to tell you that that's like amazing. You know, it's like, I'm thinking about it, man, you know, everyone's suffering is sacred. And I just wanted to take a moment to say, you know, I feel honored to be sharing this conversation with you right now. So I want to let you know that. Gina, at what point did you stop writing about as an outsider and start carrying their burdens as someone emotionally invested in their redemption?
It would definitely be after I met them all. You know, I'd already seen the NACDL amicus brief, and, you know, at that time, I kind of dilly-dallied around for several months after I read the trial transcript, trying to figure out, you know, whether I believed, you know, is there something missing here? Like, what do I not understand about this? Because I can't even believe that this would happen. And then when the NACDL came out with that amicus brief, and it just confirmed everything that I thought when I read the trial transcript, I thought, okay, now, you know, I got to go meet him. And the most horrible feeling in the world, I mean, and I've never experienced this before, because I have been in prisons, not federal prisons, but to watch someone who you know in your heart is innocent walk back to a cell after we met. It was the most horrible feeling in the world. I mean, I can still feel it in the pit of my stomach. And I felt that way when every single one, when our visits were over and they all had to walk wearing those khaki uniforms, the prison uniforms. And I was just thinking in my head, like, they're not wearing the uniform that they should be wearing. You know, it made me angry that they were wearing prison uniforms instead of their uniforms. You know what I mean? It was so awful. It was a huge motivator because I just thought, I cannot physically stand to see them walk back to that prison every time I see them. There is a limit on the number of times that I can do that. And I could not imagine how it felt for their families. I was beginning to get very close to the families. And I got to be honest with you, when, you know, I first started looking into this, they had been crucified in the media, basically. And I told my boyfriend, I said, there's no way that these families are going to talk to me. You know, I worked in LA for, you know, almost 20 years at different media outlets. Why would they ever want to talk to me? But he persuaded them. And, you know, and I think they were a little bit worried about where I was going to go with it. And when we actually met and talked and I looked at everything, I just, like, my heart was just out of my body because of what they were going through. So I just became a person who, I was just looking everywhere that I could to try to get them some relief. It was a thing that went on for years, every day.
Paul, man, that's pretty heavy. I was feeling it with you as you were emoting, like just feeling that all the anguish through that process.
It's a good way to describe it.
Yeah. Paul, when you saw you and the rest of the guys' name on the cover of Raven 23, did you feel like vindication or another fight you had to prepare for?
Ooh, that's a double-edged sword. Yeah, there was vindication there, especially knowing that this had been gone over from legal review. In my opinion, one of our greatest American authors signed to write it for us, and in the same breath, yeah, I expect another fight for sure. The powers that exist behind this, they're not quiet. We'll see what comes on the other side of it, but whatever it is, we'll face it.
Yeah, I mean, you can't run away from truth. It's the truth. I'm perfectly willing for people to try to tear this apart, because when they got out of prison, there was a lot of bad press. And I knew personally some of the people who were attacking me on my Facebook page when I was saying, yay, they're out. This is so fabulous. And they came after me, and I said, okay, what is it that you don't believe about this? Because I have 60,000 documents.
Wow.
I can show you anything that you want.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was a media campaign that I was just shocked that none of the other reporters went, this is kind of weird. Why did the government have to try him 3 times if this was such a great case? Why,
I think Nick was 5, wasn't it, total?
No, he was 3.
Okay.
But you had to go through your appeals. All the appeals probably added up to that. But, I was so shocked that, people who did the same job as me were just going, okay, one of the most influential law firms in the country, Williams and Connolly, defended Nick Slatton through 2 trials for free. Why would they do that if they thought that this was a bad case and they were murderers? Why did the NACDL, who was really kind of a liberal organization, why did they back these guys? They get thousands of requests for cases for amicus briefs every year. Why would they stick their necks out?
Yeah.
And it's only because they work for Blackwater. They work for Eric Prince. They were fighting in a war that was unpopular. I mean, it really broke my heart, because I love being a journalist. It's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. And to see people not even care about the truth was horrendous. And it's still terrible, but now I'm ready.
Did you ever feel like not continuing in journalism after?
Yes. In fact, I wanted to leave it before I started this case. I went through the 2008 meltdown of the financial world, and the things that I saw in that were very disheartening. And I just thought, I want to do something else. I would like to write movies. I'd like to do other things, but I just, when that came my way, I knew that it was something that I had to do. I couldn't leave it. So I went back and did it. But yeah, I really did.
I don't ever get emotional, but I get emotional right now. I think when I look at it, the one word that comes out of my mind is someone said, how do you define a hero, right? Someone that's willing to face limitless consequences, right? And when I think of you right now as you're talking, and in relationship to these men that were incarcerated and gone through this whole journey, I'm going, Gina, you're a hero.
Oh God.
You faced a line of fire. Paul, you want to add to that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's in our particular roles. When we worked for Blackwater, it was get the principal home safe, period. That's it. That's your mission. Make it happen. And you took on the same mindset in helping us, that you felt that it was a calling and something that that would define parts of your work. And, you know, there's times where you and I will debate back and forth about policy issues. And, you know, we do it in good fun, but at the end of the day, we're both Americans. And that's the way you saw us.
But didn't you see it when you were doing your job, and you guys were heroes? I mean, you were trying to bring stability to Iraq. You were helping American diplomats try to rebuild a country. So, you know, that was what you were doing, and you thought, that's my job. I'm great at it, and I'm going to do it. That's how I see this. Every reporter needs to take a look at what's going on, you know, not what's my side. You need to say, my job with the immense power that I have is to make sure that people who do not have voices or who are being oppressed are heard and that their stories are told. It's not hard. It's easy. It just takes you to step away from power and say, I'm not part of that. I am something different. I am part of democracy, and that's what I stand for.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. What did this book, putting this book into the world, demand of you, not just as a writer, but as someone now forever bound to the consequences, which we talked about, the consequences of its truth? As a hero.
I mean, I feel, come on. I got all the papers. Ask me. I'll show you.
Got the receipts.
Yeah, I'm ready. This is one of the proudest things that I've ever done because it's a beautiful story because of the way it ended.
Yeah.
You know, and the way that it continues to end. All of the guys are doing fantastic. You know, what they went through is, you know, helped me every day get up and say, no, I'm going to keep on going. I'm doing this. Paul and Nick and Dustin and Evan, the way that they're living right now, after having gone through what they went through in Baghdad, I can do this. And I think that that's what I want the book to be about, is to say, you know, you have so much more power as a community than you think you do if you will just work together. I mean, the other guy who I want to call out as really a hero is Michael Flaherty, who was my partner in the podcast that we did about Raven 2-3, which is kind of a precursor of this. He's a Republican. He's an evangelical Christian. We couldn't be more different. I mean, he's actually pretty moderate in terms of, you know, his beliefs, but we came together to do this, and, you know, we just kind of stuck with it together, and we had a lot of disagreements about certain things, but at the end of the day, it's like Paul said, we're Americans, and there's something beautiful about trying to make that work with all of the diverse viewpoints that we have. I mean, we stuck together and did it, you know.
Yeah.
You should see, like,
Sleepless nights, tears with each other. And
right.
the book itself was a journey just
Yeah.
aside from everything.
Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, I think all of us had a lot of trauma around it, just because we, you know, it's great now, you know how it ended, but when we were in the middle of it, we didn't know. I mean, Dustin got stabbed in prison a couple times, and I kept thinking, man, you know, and they put him, you know, in such a violent prison, him and Nick. Nick was beaten by the prison guards. So we were afraid a lot that something would happen to them, that they would get killed before we could, you know, exonerate them. So, I mean, I just, you know, I want to say to your viewers, you have a lot of power, but you have to put aside all of the things that make you different and focus on the goal.
That's good.
Paul, last question for you. What part of your incarceration still shows up when you leave today, from across the table or inside the system?
Ask me one more time. I'm sorry.
Okay, what part of your incarceration still shows up when you leave today, from across the table or inside the system?
That human nature is both complicated and fascinating. And that the person on the other side, whatever emotion they're exhibiting, there are multiple layers behind that. And so even today in my own position, I think that's the reason I'm so drawn to government, is in order to have good governance, you've got to have people that are willing to put in that work. And so if I'm working with a constituent, going through a particular issue, I realized that that was my wife one day advocating for us. That was Gina on the phone calling up congressmen and senators. That was Kelly and Jessica. And I mean, there's just so many names to go through. It was people were advocating constantly on our behalf. And I realized that leading up to this, life can be extremely complicated, but we can eliminate a lot of those complications by setting down preconceptions.
Yeah.
There was a guy that I met in El Reno who, as I understand it, was 8 years old with a belt-fed saw on the front windowsill of his home fighting back against gangsters. That was his introduction to life.
Mm.
And he found himself in a federal prison with a whole lot of time because he had lived that life. And he came to me one day when we were working out, and he was like, Paul, I want to tell you something. It's okay. He said, until I met you, I didn't really know there was another way to live. Wow, what do you mean? And so he walked me through his history and later gave his life to Christ and has been working towards that out date, right? Good guy, really good guy. He was raised in that environment. He didn't know. And so walking away from that has really instilled in me, we all have our stuff, we all have our things. But if we're not willing to come to the table and express our needs in an honest and sincere way and respect the boundaries of others, we can make a lot of progress. No matter what's behind your name, right?
Yeah.
We're Americans. We're Americans, and we have a lot of the same goals.
Yep.
Amazing.
Well said.
Well said.
Yeah.
Gina, this book, talk about what you want people to take away from it. What do y'all have planned as far as tour wise, where you can find it and everything?
So it's available pretty much on any platform that you, Books A Million, Amazon, Walmart, Target. Can you think of anything?
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble, and it's going to be in the airports too. We're really excited about that for some reason.
Nice.
Yeah, and we're going to just be, promoting it wherever we can. But I guess the reason that I wrote it was that pretty much what we just said was that experience, the experience of going through that really changed me so much. It pretty much put the cap on my life. Like, I was a journalist for 30-something years before I even encountered this case. And it was a wonderful, fun experience. But I don't think that I felt that I did anything important until I got to this case. So the book talks about journalism, and it talks about communities and the way that they come together and fight. And it talks about the bravery of 4 American soldiers who, came from 4 little bitty towns and became international figures for, a bad reason at first, and then a fantastic reason because of their bravery. So
we wouldn't be here without you, without Kristen, without Jessica, without Kelly, without
all your parents,
all of our family. I mean, you guys,
your friends. I mean, there was not one person who, when I picked up the phone and said, I need to talk to you, I need to interview you for this podcast, I need to know what you know, not one person said no. They all called me back. They were all interested. They were all in.
That's beautiful. Before we wrap up, I want to say these 4 names: Paul Slough, Nicholas Slatton, Evan Liberty, and Dustin Hurd. You guys aren't here, but I want you to know that if you were here, I'd be asking you questions. I'd want to know how you felt about everything we shared. So I want to honor you by saying your names again. Paul, you're here. Nicholas Slatton, Evan Liberty, and Dustin Hurd. Hopefully I'll have the pleasure and honor to get to meet you and shake your hand and say thank you for your service and thank you for your sacrifice. And I just want to tell both y'all thank you for your service and your sacrifice. Gina, true hero. You need to put journal and then /hero on the side of that. Do you agree, right, Paul?
Hero journalist.
Dude, hero journal.
Doing my job.
Well,
Thank
well, guys, I appreciate you taking the time. It was an honor to share in this conversation with you. I'm going to take so much from this, and so will everybody else once we put it out there.
Thank you. And thank you for having us.
It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, that's it for Unfinished Business, a podcast for veterans pursuing new life missions. As I always say, have peace and the light in you, and remember that the ocean refuses no river.